Have you ever wondered what animals really understand? When a German Shepherd rescues a park ranger left for dead, their bond uncovers dangerous government secrets. Not just a rescue story, but a fight for truth that will change everything. Subscribe now and tell me where you're watching from. A thin veil of mist hung over the pines of Blackridge National Forest in northern Montana. The early October air crisp with the promise of an early winter. The mountains loomed in the distance, partially obscured by low-hanging clouds that threatened rain. It was in this ethereal setting that Max, a powerfully built 4-year-old German Shepherd with intelligent amber eyes and a sleek black and tan coat, was undergoing his final phase of wilderness search and rescue training. "Good boy, Max. Stay focused," called Sergeant Parker, a veteran K-9 handler with the Forest Service. His weathered face creased with concentration as he watched his star pupil navigate the challenging terrain with practiced precision. Max had been exceptional from the start, quick to learn, eager to please, with an uncanny intuition that sometimes left even Parker speechless. Today's exercise was routine. Locate the hidden dummy that simulated a lost hiker, alert, and wait for backup. But something felt different in the air. The dog's ears suddenly perked up, his posture tensing. A low whine escaped his throat. "What is it, boy?" Parker asked, checking his GPS unit. "That's not the direction of the training scenario." Without warning, Max bolted, a streak of black and tan disappearing between the towering pines, ignoring Parker's sharp command to heel. "Max, come back here. Max." The sergeant's voice echoed through the forest, but the dog was already gone, following an invisible trail that only he could sense. 3 miles away, in a secluded ravine seldom visited even by the most adventurous hikers, Park Ranger Elena Cortez drifted in and out of consciousness. Her uniform was torn, her olive skin bruised, and her wrists and ankles bound with coarse rope that had already drawn blood. At 32, Elena was the youngest lead conservation ranger in Blackridge's history, and her fierce dedication to protecting the forest had clearly made her enemies. "You should have backed off," one of the masked men had snarled the previous night, his breath hot against her face as they ambushed her during her solitary patrol. "Some things are worth more than your precious trees." Now, as morning light filtered weakly through the forest canopy, Elena shivered violently. The night temperatures had dropped below freezing, and hypothermia was setting in. Her thoughts turned to her father, how he had taught her to love these woods, to understand them as an extension of herself. Would she die here, among the pines she had sworn to protect? A rustling in the undergrowth startled her fully awake. A mountain lion? A bear? Her heart raced with terror. Instead, Max emerged, magnificent and alert, his intelligent eyes assessing her situation instantly. He approached cautiously, head low, a soft whine in his throat. "Hey there," Elena whispered, her voice cracking from thirst. "Where did you come from, buddy?" The dog edged closer, sniffing her bound hands. To Elena's astonishment, Max began gnawing at the ropes with deliberate precision, his powerful jaws working methodically against her restraints. "What are you doing?" she murmured in disbelief as the fibers began to fray. Good boy, good boy." When the ropes proved too tough for even his sharp teeth to sever completely, Max made a decision that defied conventional animal behavior. He curled his warm body around Elena's, positioning himself to maximize heat transfer to her core. "Are you keeping me warm?" Tears sprang to Elena's eyes as the dog's steady heartbeat pulsed against her side. "Thank you," she whispered, burying her face in his thick fur. "Just thank you." As dawn brightened into morning, Elena drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time she opened her eyes, Max was there, vigilant, protective, somehow understanding that her life depended on his presence. His amber eyes never left her face, as if willing her to stay alive. Somewhere in the distance, search whistles echoed. Max lifted his head, alert but unwilling to leave his charge. He let out a series of sharp, commanding barks that carried through the forest with surprising clarity. "They'll find us now," Elena murmured, her fingers weakly gripping his fur. "You're saving my life, aren't you?" And in that moment, something profound and inexplicable passed between them. A connection that transcended the normal boundaries between human and animal. A bond forged in that critical moment of survival that would alter both their destinies in ways neither could yet imagine. 3 hours later, Elena found herself wrapped in thermal blankets in the back of a rescue vehicle. Medical personnel hovering around her while she clutched a cup of hot tea with still trembling hands. Her dark hair, normally pulled back in a practical ponytail, hung in tangled strands around her face, which was pale beneath her natural tan. "Your core temperature was dangerously low," explained the paramedic, a woman with kind eyes named Tamara. "If that dog hadn't found you when he did." She let the sentence hang unfinished in the air. Elena nodded, her eyes fixed on the scene outside the vehicle's open doors. Sergeant Parker was attempting to leash Max, who was whining and straining toward the ambulance with uncharacteristic disobedience. "That's not like him at all," Parker was saying to the Forest Service chief. "Max is our most disciplined K9. I've never seen him resist commands like this." Elena called out weakly. Could you let him come here?" Parker looked uncertain but released the leash. Immediately, Max bounded to Elena's side, his tail wagging as he placed his head gently on her lap. The medical team exchanged glances. "I need to examine those rope burns," Tamara said, "and we really should get you to the hospital." "Just another minute," Elena pleaded, running her fingers through Max's thick fur. "I don't think I would have survived without him." Chief Ranger Mike Blackwood, a gruff man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes, ducked his head into the vehicle. "Cortez, what the hell happened out there? Who did this to you?" Elena's expression hardened. "3 men. Masks. They knew who I was, Chief. This wasn't random." Blackwood's jaw tightened. "The new timber restrictions?" "Almost certainly," she replied. "They mentioned the conservation zones. Said I was hurting local business." The illegal logging operations in Blackridge had escalated since Elena had successfully pushed for expanded protection zones. The restrictions had angered some local interests, particularly Winchester Timber, a company with a history of skirting regulations. "Did you recognize any voices?" Blackwood pressed. Elena shook her head. "They were careful, but one of them—" She hesitated. "One of them smelled like cedar and mint. That unique soap they sell at the Piney Ridge Trading Post." Blackwood nodded, making a mental note. "We'll find them, Cortez. For now, you're on medical leave. 2 weeks minimum. But Chief, that's an order. And when you do come back, you'll be on headquarters duty for a while." Elena's brown eyes flashed with indignation. "They win if you take me off patrol. They win if you're dead," Blackwood countered grimly. "Headquarters duty. No arguments." As the chief stepped away, Parker approached and cleared his throat. "We need to get Max back to the training center. He's due for evaluation tomorrow." At these words, Max pressed closer to Elena, a low whine escaping his throat. "Can it wait a day?" Elena asked, her hand protectively on Max's head. Parker looked uncomfortable. "It's not up to me. The program director, Dr. Mercer, has strict protocols. Let me at least say goodbye to him properly," Elena insisted. As Parker stepped back to give her space, Elena leaned down to Max's ear. "Thank you for saving my life," she whispered. "I don't understand how you found me or why you stayed, but I will never forget it." Max's intelligent amber eyes seemed to understand every word. He licked her hand once, then reluctantly allowed Parker to lead him away. Every few steps, the dog would look back at Elena, his reluctance to leave her evident in every line of his body. As the ambulance doors finally closed and the vehicle began to move, Elena felt a strange emptiness, as if something that belonged with her had been taken away. Through the rear window, she watched Max straining against his leash, barking in what sounded eerily like distress. "He'll be okay," Tamara assured her, misinterpreting her concern. "They'll take good care of him at the training center." But Elena wasn't worried about Max. She was worried about herself. Something had happened in those woods, something beyond ordinary explanation. For those hours when her life hung in the balance, she had felt a connection with the German shepherd that defied logic, as if he could read her thoughts, sense her pain, understand her fear. "He's not just any dog," she murmured, more to herself than to the paramedic. "I've worked with search and rescue for 10 years, Tamara said, checking Elena's fore. "And I've never seen a dog act like that with someone they just met. It's like he's imprinted on you or something." As the ambulance wound its way down the mountain road toward the hospital in the valley below, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, that her life and Max's had become intertwined in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. What she didn't know was that back at the training center, Dr. Alan Mercer was already making a phone call, his voice low and urgent. "We have a situation with Unit K-9-7. The ranger he found. I think she might be a problem." The Blackridge Forest Service Training Center resembled a small military compound more than an animal facility. Located on the outskirts of the modest town of Pinewood, its modern buildings contrasted sharply with the rustic charm of the surrounding community. Inside the main kennel area, Max paced restlessly in his pen, ignoring food and water, his eyes fixed on the entrance door. Dr. Alan Mercer observed the dog through the surveillance camera, making notes on his tablet. At 55, Mercer cut an imposing figure, tall and lean with prematurely white hair and calculating gray eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His pristine lab coat bore the insignia of both the Forest Service and a discreet logo, Project Guardian. "He's still not eating?" asked Diane Foster, a young handler with cropped blonde hair and a concerned expression. "Third day straight," Mercer replied without looking up. "His vitals are stable, but his behavior patterns have completely deviated from baseline. He wants to be with her," Diane said simply. "The ranger he rescued." Mercer's jaw tightened. K-9-7 was bred and trained for a specific purpose. This attachment is problematic. "With all due respect, sir, maybe it's exactly what the program was designed for. Enhanced empathy, heightened protective instincts. The program," Mercer cut her off coldly, "was designed to create tactical assets, not pets. Schedule a cognitive recalibration session for tomorrow morning." As Mercer strode away, Diane approached Max's kennel. The German Shepherd's typically alert posture had been replaced by dejected restlessness. When she opened the door, he barely acknowledged her presence. "What's going on in that special brain of yours, buddy?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. "What did you see in her?" 20 miles away at Pinewood General Hospital, Elena Cortez was arguing with her doctor about discharge papers. Her hospital room, sterile and impersonal, felt like a prison after 3 days of forced rest. "You had severe hypothermia and rope abrasions that nearly caused nerve damage," Dr. Reyes insisted. "Another day of observation is standard protocol." "I'm a wilderness-certified first responder," Elena countered, already pulling on her jacket despite the pain in her wrists. "I know how to monitor my own condition." The doctor sighed in resignation. "At least take the prescription for the pain medication." "Fine," Elena conceded, accepting the slip of paper. As she gathered her belongings, her phone buzzed with a text message from her younger sister, Maya. "Coming to get you. Don't argue. Mom made enchiladas." Elena smiled despite herself. At 28, Maya was 4 years her junior, but every bit as stubborn, a family trait their father had often complained about with proud exasperation before his passing 2 years ago. When Maya arrived 30 minutes later, her expression was a mixture of relief and anger. "You just had to patrol that section alone, didn't you?" she said by way of greeting, hugging Elena carefully to avoid her injuries. "It's my job," Elena replied simply as they walked toward Maya's worn but reliable Subaru. "Your job isn't to get yourself killed," Maya retorted. Her long dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her paint-stained jeans reflected her work as a local artist specializing in wilderness landscapes. "Mom's been lighting candles for 3 days straight." Elena winced. Their mother, Sophia Cortez, blended Catholic devotion with the indigenous spiritual practices of her Blackfoot heritage, a combination that intensified whenever she was worried about her daughters. When they arrived at the modest Cortez family home on the edge of town, the scent of chilies and spices enveloped Elena like a warm embrace. Sophia, a petite woman with streaks of silver in her black hair and keen eyes that missed nothing, took one look at her daughter's face and said, "You're in pain." "I'm fine, Mom," Elena insisted, but allowed herself to be guided to the kitchen table. "The forest protected you," Sophia said matter-of-factly as she served steaming plates of food. "It sent you a guardian." Elena exchanged a glance with Maya, who rolled her eyes affectionately at their mother's mysticism. But Elena couldn't dismiss the sentiment entirely. Something about Max had seemed extraordinary. "Have you heard anything about the dog?" Maya asked, sensing her sister's thoughts. "I called the training center yesterday. They said he was adjusting, whatever that means," Elena replied, frustration evident in her voice. "I just want to see him, to thank him properly." "It's just a dog, Elena," Maya said gently. "No," Elena said with unexpected firmness. "He's not just a dog. You weren't there. You didn't see how he... She trailed off, unable to explain the connection she'd felt. Later that evening, as Elena lay in her childhood bedroom, sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that ravine, cold seeping into her bones. Max's warm body curled protectively around her. She couldn't shake the memory of his intelligent eyes, so full of understanding. Her phone chimed softly with a text. Unknown number. The dog you're asking about isn't what you think. Be at Pinewood Lake tomorrow, 7 a.m., East Dock. Come alone. Elena stared at the cryptic message, her heart racing. Who would know about her interest in Max? And what did they mean, isn't what you think? Sleep forgotten, she sat up and texted back. Who is this? The reply came almost instantly. Someone who knows what Mercer is really doing with those dogs. If you care about K-9-7, be there. K-9-7. Not Max, but a designation. Something cold settled in Elena's stomach as she realized that whatever was happening at the training center might be far more complex and disturbing than she had imagined. Dawn broke over Pinewood Lake in ribbons of pink and gold, the water's surface a mirror of perfect stillness. Elena arrived 20 minutes early, her ranger instincts demanding she scout the location before the mysterious meeting. She parked her Jeep at the west entrance and hiked around the perimeter, her boots crunching softly on the gravel path. The East Dock, a weathered wooden structure extending 30 feet into the water, appeared deserted. Her wrists still ached beneath their bandages, a constant reminder of her ordeal. She dressed practically in jeans, hiking boots, and a flannel shirt beneath her favorite worn leather jacket, the one that had belonged to her father. In her pocket, a small can of bear spray served as her only protection. Coming armed had seemed excessive, but coming completely defenseless was not in her nature. At precisely 7 a.m., she heard footsteps on the dock behind her. Turning sharply, Elena found herself face to face with Diane Foster, whose Forest Service uniform identified her as a K-9 handler. You're the one who texted me? Elena asked, tension evident in her stance. Diane nodded, her expression guarded. I shouldn't be here. If Mercer finds out. She glanced nervously over her shoulder. But what's happening isn't right. Not to Max, not to any of them. What exactly is happening? Elena pressed, stepping closer. And why did you call him K-9-7? Because that's his designation in the program, Diane explained, lowering her voice. Project Guardian isn't just a search and rescue training operation. It's something else. Something classified. Elena's eyes narrowed. What kind of something else are we talking about? Enhanced canine intelligence, Diane said, the words tumbling out now. Selective breeding, cognitive stimulation protocols, specialized training that begins before they even open their eyes. They're creating dogs with unprecedented mental capabilities. That's not possible, Elena objected, though uncertainty crept into her voice. You can't just... They've been doing it for 7 years, Diane interrupted. Max is from the 3rd generation, the most successful yet. But the program was supposed to be about environmental protection, creating K-9 units that could detect poachers, identify toxic substances, predict natural disasters. Dr. Mercer has other ideas. A chilly breeze rippled across the lake, sending small waves against the dock's supports. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, processing this information. What ideas? She finally asked. Military applications, Diane replied grimly. Max and the others like him. Their cognitive abilities make them perfect for tactical operations. Mercer's been in talks with private security contractors. He's planning to redirect the program. And what does this have to do with me? Elena demanded, though a part of her already suspected the answer. Max formed a bond with you that we've never seen before, Diane explained. 3 days after your rescue, he's still not eating, barely sleeping. He's fixated on finding you again. Mercer sees it as a malfunction, but I think it's exactly what these dogs were bred for, forming profound connections with humans they're meant to protect. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Mercer called it a malfunction. Diane nodded solemnly. He scheduled Max for cognitive recalibration this morning. It's a procedure that... She hesitated. It essentially resets their emotional responses. It would erase his connection to you. That's barbaric, Elena whispered, her hands clenching into fists. When is this happening? 9 o'clock. Diane checked her watch. Just under 2 hours from now. Elena's mind raced. We need to stop it. I need to see him before they do this. That's why I'm here, Diane said, pulling a keycard from her pocket. I can get you in through the service entrance. But if we're caught, I'll take full responsibility, Elena assured her. Just get me to Max. As they hurried back toward the parking lot, Diane added, There's something else you should know. The attack on you. It might not have been just about the timber restrictions. Elena stopped in her tracks. What do you mean? The week before your attack, you filed reports about unusual activity in the North Sector, right? Unauthorized vehicles, equipment being moved at night. How did you know about that? Elena asked, suspicion flooding back. Because Mercer was furious when he saw your reports. That area is being used for field testing the K-9 units. Your patrols were getting too close. Elena felt her blood run cold. Are you saying Mercer was involved in my attack? I don't know for certain, Diane admitted. But the timing is suspicious. And the day after you were found, Mercer had a closed-door meeting with someone from Winchester Timber. Elena's mind flashed to her father's warnings about the timber company's connections to local politics and law enforcement. Had she stumbled onto something bigger than illegal logging? If Mercer's willing to erase Max's memories to protect his project, Elena said slowly, what else might he be willing to do? The two women shared a look of grim understanding as they reached the parking lot. We'll take my Jeep, Elena decided. And Diane, thank you for this. I know you're risking a lot. Max is special, Diane replied simply. All of them are. They deserve better than to be turned into weapons. As they drove toward the training center, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a threshold, that after today, there would be no going back to the life she had known. But the image of Max's intelligent eyes, the memory of his warmth keeping her alive through that frigid night, steeled her resolve. Whatever happened next, she would not abandon him to Mercer's recalibration. The Blackridge Forest Service Training Center loomed before them, its perimeter fence topped with barbed wire that seemed excessive for a facility supposedly dedicated to training rescue animals. Elena parked her Jeep in a secluded spot behind a maintenance shed, following Diane's terse directions. Security cameras? Elena asked, scanning the building's exterior. Coverage of the service entrance is minimal, Diane replied, leading the way to an unremarkable metal door at the back of the complex. But once we're inside, we'll need to be careful. Morning shift change happens at 8. That's our window. The keycard beeped softly as Diane swiped it through the reader. The door unlocked with a click that sounded thunderous in Elena's heightened state of awareness. Inside, the corridor was clinically white and eerily quiet. The antiseptic smell reminded Elena more of a laboratory than a training facility for working dogs. Their footsteps echoed slightly despite their attempts at stealth. This way, Diane whispered, leading Elena through a maze of hallways. The kennel area is downstairs, but first I need to disable the security protocols on Max's enclosure. They slipped into a small monitoring room filled with screens displaying various areas of the facility. Diane quickly logged into a computer terminal. Mercer's paranoia works in our favor, she explained, fingers flying over the keyboard. Each dog has individualized security settings. The system logs every interaction, feeding, training, medical procedures. I'm creating a false record showing Max was already moved to the recalibration lab. Elena studied the security feeds, noting the clinical precision of the operation. One screen showed a large room where 2 other German Shepherds were undergoing what appeared to be training exercises, but the complexity of the tasks, involving sequence recognition and problem solving, went far beyond standard K-9 training. These dogs, Elena murmured, they're really that different? Different enough that the program has military and intelligence agencies interested, Diane confirmed grimly. Project Guardian started as conservation-focused research, but the potential applications quickly attracted attention from other sectors. Mercer saw an opportunity to expand funding and his own influence. And what about the dogs? Do they get any say in this? Elena's voice held a bitter edge. Diane's hands paused momentarily over the keyboard. That's why I contacted you. In all my years working with this program, I've never seen a bond form as quickly and intensely as the one between you and Max. It's like he recognized something in you. A distant memory surfaced in Elena's mind. Her grandmother, her father's mother, a Blackfoot elder who had taught Elena to listen to the forest to respect the wisdom and sentience of all living beings. Animals know who needs them, her grandmother had said. They see with different eyes than we do. Done, Diane announced, interrupting Elena's thoughts. Now we need to move quickly. Follow me. They descended a flight of stairs to a lower level where the air hung heavier, filled with the subtle scents of animals and disinfectant. Through a window in a door marked K9 housing, Elena caught her first glimpse of Max since the rescue. The German Shepherd lay listlessly in a sterile enclosure, head on paws, eyes fixed on nothing. Max, Elena whispered, her heart constricting at the sight of his dejected posture. As if hearing her through the barrier, Max's head suddenly lifted, ears perked forward. A whine escaped him as he scrambled to his feet. Diane swiped her card again, and the door unlocked. Make it quick, she urged. We have maybe 10 minutes before someone notices the discrepancy in the system. Elena rushed to Max's enclosure. The moment the door opened, the German Shepherd bounded toward her with such force that she nearly lost her balance as he pressed against her legs, whining with unmistakable joy. Hey, boy, Elena murmured, kneeling to embrace him despite the pain that shot through her injured wrists. I missed you too. Max licked her face frantically, his entire body trembling with excitement. The transformation from the listless animal she'd observed moments ago was astonishing. We need to get him out of here, Elena said, looking up at Diane. I can't let them do this procedure. Diane's expression tightened with conflict. I knew you'd say that. But Elena, taking him would be considered theft of government property. They'd come after you, after both of us. Property. Elena stood, her hand resting protectively on Max's head. Look at him. He's a living being with thoughts and feelings. What they're doing here is wrong. Before Diane could respond, the door to the kennel area swung open. Dr. Alan Mercer stood in the doorway, his cold gray eyes taking in the scene with calculating precision. Behind him loomed 2 security guards in tactical gear. Ms. Cortez, he said, his voice controlled but edged with steel. I see you've made Diane's acquaintance. How unfortunate. Diane stepped forward, placing herself between Mercer and Elena. Sir, I can explain. I'm sure you can, Mercer interrupted coldly. And you'll have ample opportunity to do so during your exit interview. Your access has been revoked, effective immediately. He turned his attention to Elena, dismissing Diane entirely. As for you, Ranger Cortez, I understand your emotional attachment to K9-7 after your ordeal. Many humans anthropomorphize animals, especially in situations of stress. It's a common psychological response. This isn't about anthropomorphizing, Elena countered, her hand still on Max's head. The dog pressed closer to her side, a low growl rumbling in his chest as he stared at Mercer. Max saved my life. He performed as designed, Mercer corrected her. Though the attachment malfunction is concerning, the recalibration will address that. Attachment malfunction? Elena repeated incredulously. That's what you call loyalty? Mercer's expression hardened. I call it a deviation from operational parameters. K9-7 represents millions in research and development. His purpose is not to become emotionally fixated on individuals. Elena felt Max's muscles tensing beneath her hand, responding to the rising tension in the room. One of the security guards shifted his stance, hand drifting toward his holster. Dr. Mercer, she said carefully, forcing calm into her voice. I'd like to formally request that Max be reassigned to Ranger service. I can submit the paperwork through proper channels. A cold smile touched Mercer's lips. That won't be possible. Now, I suggest you leave willingly before this becomes a legal matter. The silence that followed Mercer's ultimatum hung heavy in the air. Elena felt Max pressing against her leg, his body vibrating with tension. Something profound was happening between them, a silent communication that transcended words. She could sense his fear, his determination, his unwillingness to be separated from her again. You were involved in my attack, weren't you? Elena said suddenly, the realization crystallizing in her mind. Those men who left me to die, they were clearing me out of the North Sector because I was getting too close to your field testing sites. A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps concern, crossed Mercer's face before his clinical mask slipped back into place. That's a serious accusation, Ranger Cortez, he replied, his voice dangerously soft. one that reflects a concerning paranoia on your part. Perhaps your traumatic experience has affected your mental state more than your medical evaluation indicated. Elena felt a chill run through her as she recognized the strategy. Discredit her. Question her stability. It was precisely the kind of gaslighting tactic that would make any further allegations from her seem like the ravings of a traumatized mind. I know what I saw in those woods before I was attacked, she pressed, standing her ground. Unauthorized equipment. Night operations in protected areas. It wasn't just illegal logging, it was your program. Max's growl deepened, as if he understood every word. The security guards exchanged uneasy glances. Dr. Mercer, one of them said, we should move this discussion somewhere more private. Indeed, Mercer agreed coolly. Gentlemen, please escort Ms. Cortez and Ms. Foster to my office. We need to discuss the consequences of today's security breach. As one of the guards stepped forward, Max's posture changed instantly. He moved in front of Elena, hackles raised, teeth bared, a clear warning that sent the guard stepping backward. Call off your dog, the guard demanded, his hand now openly resting on his holster. He's not my dog, Elena replied evenly. According to Dr. Mercer, he's government property with no real attachment to me. So perhaps you should tell me why government property is currently ready to attack anyone who comes near me. Mercer's jaw tightened visibly. K. 9-7, stand down, he commanded sharply. Max didn't move, didn't even acknowledge Mercer's voice. His focus remained entirely on protecting Elena. Fascinating, Diane murmured, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. He's completely imprinted on her. It's like nothing in the training protocol even matters anymore. This is exactly the malfunction I'm concerned about, Mercer snapped. His conditioning has been compromised. Elena knelt slowly beside Max, keeping her eyes on the guards and Mercer. This isn't a malfunction, she said softly, placing her hand on Max's back. This is what intelligence and loyalty look like when they're not being manipulated for your purposes. She felt a strange calm settling over her despite the danger of the situation. Here's what's going to happen, she continued with quiet authority. Diane and I are going to leave with Max. You're going to let us walk out because the alternative would require explaining why you have armed guards threatening a Forest Service ranger who was nearly killed on duty just days ago. That's not going to happen, Mercer replied coldly. K. 9-7 is federal property under my supervision. And I'm a federal employee who was attacked while investigating irregularities in a protected forest, Elena countered. I wonder which story would interest the regional director more, or perhaps the press? A tense silence followed. Elena could almost see the calculations running behind Mercer's eyes, the risk assessment, the potential for exposure, the damage to his program if certain questions started being asked. You have no idea what you're interfering with, he finally said, his voice low. This program has implications far beyond your forest conservation crusade. I know exactly what I'm interfering with, Elena replied steadily. The exploitation of extraordinary animals for purposes that have nothing to do with their well-being or the environment they were supposedly bred to protect. From the corner of her eye, Elena saw Diane edging toward the door. Max remained vigilant, his body still shielding Elena from the guards. Let's say I allow you to leave with the dog, Mercer said after a long moment. What then? You'd be harboring valuable government property. Your career would be over. Your future prospects, non-existent. Elena felt the weight of his words. Her career as a ranger had been her entire life's focus since she was a teenager following her father through these same forests. Could she really throw it all away for a dog she'd known for less than a week? Then she remembered the feeling of Max's warmth as hypothermia threatened to claim her life. The gentle yet determined way he'd tried to free her from the ropes. The intelligence in his eyes that went far beyond what any normal dog should possess. I'll take that risk, she said firmly. Mercer's expression hardened. Guards, secure K. 9-7. Use tranquilizers if necessary. As one of the guards reached for the tranquilizer gun at his belt, a new voice cut through the tension. That won't be necessary. All eyes turned to the doorway where Chief Ranger Mike Blackwood stood, his expression thunderous. Behind him were two uniformed police officers. Chief, Elena breathed, relief flooding through her. Would someone care to explain why my ranger, who was assaulted on duty and is supposed to be on medical leave, is being threatened by armed security personnel? Blackwood demanded, his gaze boring into Mercer. For the first time, Mercer's composure faltered visibly. "This is a restricted federal facility, Chief Blackwood. You have no jurisdiction here." "Actually," one of the police officers interjected, stepping forward with a document in hand. "We have a warrant to inspect these premises based on reports of unauthorized activity in protected forest areas. In jurisdiction or not, threatening a federal officer is still a crime, regardless of whose land you're standing on." The power in the room had shifted palpably. Elena felt Max relax slightly against her leg, though his eyes remained fixed on Mercer with undisguised hostility. Chief Blackwood's weathered face betrayed no emotion as he stepped further into the room, but Elena knew him well enough to detect the controlled fury in his measured movements. 20 years in the Forest Service had given him a poker face that intimidated even the most seasoned rangers. "Dr. Mercer," Blackwood said, his voice deceptively calm, "I received some very interesting information this morning. An anonymous tip about experimental procedures being conducted on federal land without proper environmental impact assessments or permits." Elena glanced at Diane, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. The handler had covered all bases. "Whatever you've heard is misinformation," Mercer replied smoothly, though his earlier confidence had visibly cracked. "Project Guardian operates under classified directives with full federal authorization." "Then you won't mind showing us those authorizations," countered the older of the two police officers, a sergeant with salt and pepper hair and skeptical eyes. "Along with your permits for the equipment installation in the north sector of the reserve." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Those documents are classified. You need proper clearance." "What I need," Blackwood interrupted, "is an explanation for why my ranger was attacked and left to die in those woods days after filing reports about unauthorized activity in exactly the same area where your classified operations are taking place." Max had not moved from Elena's side, but his posture had subtly shifted from defensive to alert, as if he was following every word of the conversation. His intelligent eyes moved between the speakers, processing information in a way that seemed impossible for an animal. "Chief," Elena said, seizing the moment, "there's something else you should know." She gestured to Max. "The dogs in this facility aren't just ordinary K-9 units. They've been genetically selected and specially trained for enhanced cognitive abilities. That's what Project Guardian really is." Mercer's face flushed with anger. "That information is classified." "Not anymore," Diane interjected, stepping forward with renewed confidence now that allies had arrived. "I've documented everything. The breeding program, the cognitive enhancement protocols, the military applications Mercer's been pursuing behind the scenes." The second police officer, younger and keen-eyed, was studying Max with newfound interest. "Is that why this dog is acting so aware? I've worked with K-9 units before, but I've never seen one behave quite like this. Max found me in the woods through terrain he'd never been trained to navigate," Elena explained. "He tried to free me from my restraints, and when he couldn't, he kept me warm through the night, preventing hypothermia. These aren't just trained behaviors. He was problem-solving, making decisions." "Fascinating as this all is," Mercer cut in with barely contained rage, "it doesn't change the fact that K-9-7 is government property under my supervision." "His name is Max," Elena said firmly, her hand resting protectively on the dog's head. Chief Blackwood had been observing the German shepherd thoughtfully. "Seems to me," he said slowly, "that this animal has formed a bond with Ranger Cortez that directly contributed to saving her life. In my book, that means something." He turned to Mercer with steel in his eyes. "Until the legality of your operation is fully investigated, I'm officially requesting that this K-9 be temporarily reassigned to Ranger Service custody as a material witness in an ongoing assault investigation." "You can't do that," Mercer sputtered. "The protocols, actually, he can," the older police sergeant interjected. "And our warrant gives us authority to impound any evidence relevant to potential criminal activity within the protected forest areas. If you'd like to dispute that, you're welcome to do so through proper legal channels, which would, of course, require making the nature of your operation here public record." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. To fight the temporary reassignment of Max would mean exposing Project Guardian to precisely the kind of scrutiny Mercer had been working to avoid. A tense silence filled the room as Mercer calculated his options. Finally, his shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly in defeat. "Fine," he said coldly. "Take the dog. Temporarily. But this isn't over, Cortez. Not by a long shot." The threat in his voice was unmistakable, but Elena found herself unafraid. With Max pressed against her leg and her chief standing beside her, she felt a strength she hadn't known she possessed. "I'll need his medical records and training documentation," she said calmly. "You'll get what's publicly available for a standard K-9 unit," Mercer replied. "Nothing more." Diane stepped forward. "I have copies of everything," she said quietly. "The real files." Mercer's eyes widened with fury. "That's theft of government property." "No," Diane countered, standing her ground. "It's whistleblowing on unethical practices." Chief Blackwood nodded to the officers. "Gentlemen, why don't you begin your inspection while we finalize the paperwork for the K-9 transfer? I believe Dr. Mercer has an office where we can discuss the details more privately." As the group moved toward the door, Elena knelt beside Max, looking into his intelligent eyes. "We're going home," she whispered, and the German shepherd pressed his muzzle against her cheek in what felt uncannily like understanding. Outside in the crisp autumn air, with temporary custody paperwork completed and Max sitting alertly in the back of her Jeep, Elena finally felt herself breathe freely. Diane had supplied a flash drive with Project Guardian's files, and Chief Blackwood had arranged for Max to stay with Elena during the investigation. "For his safety and yours," he'd explained gravely. "What you did in there was brave," Blackwood told her as they prepared to leave the facility. "But Mercer isn't the type to surrender easily. Watch your back, Cortez." "I have help now," Elena replied, glancing at Max, who sat vigilantly in her vehicle, his amber eyes never leaving her. What neither of them realized as they drove away was that the battle had only just begun, that Mercer's connections reached far higher than either of them suspected, and that the bond between woman and dog would soon be tested in ways none of them could imagine. The first snowfall of the season dusted the Blackridge forest by mid-November, transforming the landscape into a pristine wonderland of white. 3 weeks had passed since Elena had brought Max home to her small cabin on the edge of the forest reserve. The dwelling, built by her father 30 years earlier, sat nestled among towering pines with a view of the distant mountains. It was modest but sturdy, a single bedroom, open living area with a wood stove, and a wraparound porch where Elena often sat with her morning coffee, watching the forest come alive. That morning, Elena studied the files from Diane's flash drive for perhaps the 20th time, spread across her kitchen table while Max lay at her feet. The documents revealed the disturbing scope of Project Guardian: 3 generations of specially bred dogs, cognitive enhancement protocols that began in utero, and neurological stimulation techniques that pushed the boundaries of animal intelligence. "How do you feel about all this?" she asked Max softly. The German shepherd lifted his head, those intelligent amber eyes focused on her with an intensity that still sometimes took her breath away. In the weeks they'd spent together, Elena had discovered that Max understood far more than any dog should. He could distinguish between dozens of named objects, follow multi-step instructions, and seemed to grasp the emotional content of human speech with uncanny accuracy. Most remarkably, he had developed a system of communication through a combination of different barks, paw movements, and subtle head gestures that Elena was slowly learning to interpret. The sound of a vehicle approaching broke her concentration. Through the window, she saw Chief Blackwood's Forest Service truck pulling up the gravel driveway. Max was already at the door, alert but not alarmed. He had come to recognize the chief's vehicle. "Morning, Cortez." Blackwood greeted her as she opened the door. His breath formed clouds in the cold air. "Got some news." Elena ushered him inside, where the warmth from the wood stove created a cozy atmosphere. "Coffee, please," he nodded, removing his heavy jacket. "Hello to you too, Max." The dog approached, allowing Blackwood to briefly pat his head before returning to Elena's side. "Still playing favorites, I see," the chief remarked with a hint of amusement. "He's protective," Elena replied, pouring coffee into a mug adorned with pine trees. "So what's the news?" Blackwood's expression grew serious as he accepted the steaming mug. "The investigation into your attack hit a wall. All 3 suspects have alibis provided by Winchester Timber executives." "Convenient," Elena muttered, unsurprised but disappointed. There's more, Blackwood continued, his weathered face grim. The Department of Defense has stepped in regarding Project Guardian. They've classified everything related to the program. The warrant's been quashed, and the police investigation into the facility has been shut down. Elena felt a cold knot form in her stomach. They're burying it. Completely, Blackwood confirmed. And there's something else. Your temporary custody of Max. He paused, glancing at the German Shepherd. It's being challenged. Mercer has filed official paperwork claiming critical federal property has been improperly reassigned. He's not property, Elena said sharply, her hand instinctively finding Max's head. The dog leaned against her leg, sensing her distress. I know that, Blackwood replied gently. But legally, that's exactly what he is. And Mercer has powerful friends. The hearing is scheduled for next week. Elena sank into a chair, her mind racing. What are my options? Officially, Blackwood sighed. Not many. You can argue that Max has become essential to your recovery and work. You can emphasize his role in saving your life. But with the DoD involved. He trailed off, the implication clear. And unofficially, Elena asked, meeting his gaze directly. Blackwood hesitated, then set his coffee down. I didn't say this, but Montana's a big state with a lot of remote areas. People and animals go missing in the wilderness all the time. Elena understood immediately what he was suggesting. Run. Disappear with Max into the backcountry where even the federal government would struggle to find them. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and tempting. I can't abandon everything my father built here, she said finally. And running would just confirm Mercer's narrative that I'm unstable. Then we fight this through proper channels. Blackwood nodded, respecting her decision. I've reached out to an old friend, Rebecca Winters. She's an attorney specializing in environmental law, but she's also worked on some animal rights cases. If anyone can help navigate this legal mess, it's her. Max had been watching their conversation intently, his head moving between them as if following the discussion. Suddenly, he stood and walked to the window, his posture alert but not alarmed. Moments later, the sound of another vehicle reached them, a small blue sedan pulling up behind Blackwood's truck. Maya stepped out, carrying groceries and what appeared to be a thick file folder. Your sister knows? Blackwood asked, noting the purposeful way Maya approached the cabin. She's been helping research precedents, Elena explained, moving to open the door. Law school has to be good for something, right? Maya burst in with her characteristic energy, shaking snow from her dark hair. Chief, she acknowledged with a nod before turning to her sister. I found something. A case from 2019. A military working dog that was reassigned to his handler after they both survived an IED explosion. The court ruled that the bond formed during trauma created a unique working relationship that served the public interest. Hope flickered to life in Elena's chest. That could work for us. Maybe, Maya cautioned, setting down her bags and extracting the file folder. The circumstances were different. The handler was military, and the dog was already assigned to him. But the principle might apply. The key was proving that the dog performed better with that specific handler than he would with anyone else. Max approached Maya, greeting her with a gentle nudge of his muzzle against her hand. Of all the people in Elena's life, Maya was the only one besides Elena herself that Max seemed completely comfortable with. We need to document everything, Maya continued, scratching Max behind the ears. Every indication of his intelligence, his responsiveness to you specifically, anything that shows he's not just a piece of equipment that can be reassigned. I've been keeping records, Elena replied, gesturing to a notebook on the counter. Daily observations, response patterns, communication attempts. Blackwood looked thoughtful. The community angle might help too. Several of the local rangers have commented on how Max has helped you return to duty more quickly than expected. It was true. Despite her injuries and the trauma of the attack, Elena had returned to limited duty after just 10 days instead of the prescribed 2 weeks. Max's presence had given her a sense of security and purpose that accelerated her recovery. She had been assigned to the visitor center and educational programs, desk duty, essentially, but it was still work, and Max had quickly become a favorite with visitors, especially children. There's something else, Elena said slowly, an idea forming. The traditional knowledge component. My grandmother always said that animals choose their people, that there's a spiritual connection that can't be manufactured or controlled. Maya nodded enthusiastically. Cultural significance. The court might be sensitive to indigenous perspectives, especially given the location of the reserve and its historical significance to the Blackfoot people. As the three of them discussed strategy, Max suddenly stiffened, his ears forward, gaze fixed intently on the window. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a warning sound Elena had rarely heard from him. "What is it, boy?" she asked, moving to the window. At the edge of the tree line, partially obscured by falling snow, stood a figure observing the cabin. Even at this distance, Elena recognized the tall, lean silhouette of Alan Mercer. "We have company," she said quietly, feeling Max press against her leg. Blackwood joined her at the window, his expression darkening. "He's sending a message, letting you know you're being watched." "Well," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the chill that ran through her. "Two can play that game." She opened the door and stepped onto the porch with Max at her side, staring directly at Mercer across the distance. The message was clear. She wasn't intimidated, and she wasn't alone. After a long moment, Mercer turned and disappeared into the trees, but the unspoken threat lingered in the air like the falling snow, silent, pervasive, and cold. The community hall of Pinewood buzzed with tension on the morning of the hearing. Though officially closed to the public, word had spread throughout the small town, and dozens of residents gathered outside in silent support. Many held handmade signs with slogans like "Max saved our ranger" and "Heroes have four paws." Inside, Elena sat rigidly beside Rebecca Winters, a formidable woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a severe bun. Her no-nonsense demeanor and impeccable credentials had given Elena a flicker of hope in an otherwise bleak legal landscape. "Remember," Rebecca whispered as they reviewed their notes one final time, "this isn't a full court proceeding. It's an administrative hearing to determine temporary custody pending the full investigation. Our job today is simply to establish enough doubt about Mercer's claims to maintain the status quo." Elena nodded, her fingers absently stroking Max's head beside her chair. The German shepherd sat perfectly still, his alert posture and attentive gaze earning curious glances from everyone in the room. He was the only animal present, allowed in only after Rebecca had argued fiercely that his behavior was central to their case. Across the room, Dr. Mercer sat with a team of 3 attorneys and a stern-faced woman in a military uniform bearing colonel's insignia. The DoD representative, Elena realized with a sinking feeling. Mercer caught her eye and offered a cold smile that contained not an ounce of warmth. "All rise," announced the clerk as Judge Hamilton entered, a distinguished man in his 60s with a reputation for fairness but strict adherence to legal precedent. Not necessarily an advantage for Elena's unorthodox case. "Be seated," the judge instructed, surveying the room with practiced neutrality. "Let me be clear from the outset. This hearing concerns the temporary custody of a federally owned service animal designated K-9-7, currently in the possession of Forest Service Ranger Elena Cortez. We are not here to adjudicate the broader claims regarding Project Guardian, which remain under separate investigation." Elena felt a twinge of frustration. By separating Max's case from the allegations about Project Guardian, the judge was effectively cutting off their strongest arguments about Mercer's ethics and motives. "Mr. Dalton, you may present the government's position," the judge continued, nodding to Mercer's lead attorney. Thomas Dalton rose smoothly, his expensive suit and practiced demeanor exuding confidence. "Your Honor, this case is quite straightforward. K-9-7 is federal property, specifically an experimental service animal developed through significant government investment for specialized environmental protection work. Dr. Mercer, as project director, has legal custody and responsibility for all animals in the program." He gestured dismissively toward Elena. "While we appreciate Ranger Cortez's emotional attachment to the animal following her rescue, emotions cannot supersede clear legal ownership. The temporary reassignment was made under false pretenses and without proper authorization. We simply seek to return valuable government property to its rightful custodians." Rebecca Winters stood next, her calm voice belying the intensity in her eyes. "Your Honor, this case is anything but straightforward. Max, designation K-9-7, is not merely property, but a sentient being with extraordinary cognitive abilities, as the government's own research confirms. Those same abilities have created a unique bond with Ranger Cortez that directly impacts his functioning and effectiveness. She placed several documents before the judge. We have expert testimony from veterinary behaviorists documenting that Max's separation from Ranger Cortez causes significant distress that compromises his health and working ability. This isn't sentimentality. It's a measurable biological response that renders him less effective as a service animal when separated from her. The arguments continued for nearly 2 hours, with Mercer's team presenting training logs and program protocols while Rebecca countered with documentation of Max's behavior changes and Elena's recovery progress. Throughout it all, Max remained attentive, his intelligent eyes following each speaker with unsettling awareness. Finally, Judge Hamilton called Elena herself to testify. As she took the stand, she felt Max's eyes on her, giving her strength. "Ranger Cortez," the judge began. "In your own words, please explain why you believe K-9-7, Max, should remain in your custody." Elena took a deep breath. "Your Honor, in my 15 years with the Forest Service, I've worked with dozens of service animals. None have displayed the level of intelligence, problem-solving, and emotional awareness that Max demonstrates daily." She described in detail how Max had saved her life, not just finding her, but recognizing her hypothermia and actively providing warmth through the night. She explained the communication system they had developed, his ability to identify specific medicinal plants in the forest that even trained botanists sometimes overlooked. "But most importantly," she continued, her voice steady, "Max chooses to stay with me. When given freedom to move, to make his own decisions, he consistently chooses to remain at my side. That's not training, that's something deeper." Dalton rose for cross-examination, his expression skeptical. "Ranger Cortez, isn't it true that your grandmother was a practitioner of traditional Blackfoot spiritual beliefs that attribute supernatural qualities to animals?" "Objection," Rebecca interjected sharply. "Relevance. I'm establishing the witness's predisposition to anthropomorphize animals based on cultural beliefs," Dalton countered smoothly. "I'll allow it," Judge Hamilton ruled. "Please answer the question, Ranger." Elena straightened her shoulders. "My grandmother was a Blackfoot elder who taught me to respect the intelligence and agency of all living beings. That's not superstition. It's an understanding that animals have their own form of consciousness that deserves recognition." "And isn't it also true," Dalton pressed, "that you were diagnosed with PTSD following your attack, potentially affecting your perception of the animal's behavior?" A murmur ran through the room. Elena felt heat rising to her face, but kept her composure. "The medical evaluation noted trauma response consistent with a near-death experience, not clinical PTSD. And my observations of Max have been independently verified by Forest Service colleagues, veterinarians, and visitors to our educational programs." When Dalton finished his questioning, Max suddenly stood and walked directly to Elena at the witness stand, sitting beside her in a clear display of choice and loyalty that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Judge Hamilton raised an eyebrow but didn't comment on the dog's movement. "Do you have any final statements before I make my determination?" he asked both attorneys. Rebecca rose once more. "Your Honor, we would like to request a brief demonstration of Max's capabilities, if the court permits. Seeing his cognitive abilities firsthand may provide context that testimony alone cannot convey." After a moment's consideration, Judge Hamilton nodded. "I'll allow it." Elena returned to her seat and retrieved a small canvas bag she had brought. From it, she withdrew 20 small cards with different images, plants, animals, and Forest Service equipment, placing them in a random arrangement on the floor. "Max," she said clearly, "find fireweed." Without hesitation, the German Shepherd identified the card with the purple wildflower, placing his paw directly on it. "Now find Ranger Badge, then Pine Marten, then Water Bottle," she instructed, naming the items in sequence without pointing or providing visual cues. Max executed the sequence flawlessly, identifying each item in the correct order. A ripple of impressed murmurs spread through the courtroom. "One final demonstration," Elena said, making eye contact with the judge. "Max, how many people are wearing Forest Service uniforms in this room?" Max barked precisely 4 times, corresponding exactly to Elena, Chief Blackwood, and 2 rangers seated in the back row. It was a counting ability that went well beyond standard training. After a brief recess, Judge Hamilton delivered his ruling with careful neutrality. While I find the government's ownership claims legally sound, I also recognize the unique circumstances of this case. The evidence suggests that K-9-7's separation from Ranger Cortez may compromise his functional capabilities that represent significant government investment. He adjusted his glasses. Therefore, I am ordering that temporary custody remain with Ranger Cortez for a period of 6 months, during which time the animal's performance will be professionally evaluated. At the conclusion of this period, a permanent determination will be made based on objective assessment of where K-9-7 functions most effectively. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough, for now. As Elena left the courtroom with Max at her heel, she felt Mercer's cold gaze following them. The battle had been won, but she knew with absolute certainty that the war was just beginning. What she didn't yet realize was that somewhere in the Project Guardian files, buried in data she hadn't yet discovered, lay a secret about Max's origins that would change everything. A secret Mercer would do anything to protect. The first heavy snowfall of December transformed Blackridge Forest into a winter wonderland. Elena stood on her cabin porch, steam rising from her coffee mug as she watched Max bound joyfully through the fresh powder, his dark coat stark against the pristine white. 3 weeks had passed since the hearing, a fragile peace settling over their lives as they established new routines. Elena had returned to limited field duty, with Max officially designated as her service partner. Their educational presentations at the visitor center had become wildly popular, drawing crowds of fascinated tourists and locals alike. Children especially were captivated by Max's intelligence, his ability to identify dozens of plant and animal species, and his uncanny understanding of complex instructions. "He's not just smart for a dog," Maya had commented after watching one such demonstration. "He's smart, period." The morning's solitude was broken by the sound of tires crunching over snow. Elena recognized Diane Foster's sedan winding up the driveway. Since being dismissed from the training center, Diane had been working with Rebecca Winters, providing crucial insider testimony about Project Guardian. Her knowledge of the program's protocols had proven invaluable in developing a care regimen for Max. Max bounded back to the porch as Diane parked, his tail wagging in greeting. The former handler had become one of the few people he genuinely seemed to trust. "Morning," Diane called, clutching a thick file folder as she navigated the snowy path. Her expression was tense, lacking its usual easy smile. "What's wrong?" Elena asked immediately, recognizing the worry in her friend's face. "I've been going through the technical files from the flash drive," Diane explained as they entered the warm cabin. "There's something you need to see." She spread several documents across the kitchen table, genetic profiles, brain scan images, and complex charts that Elena couldn't fully comprehend. "Remember how I told you Max was part of the 3rd generation of the program?" Diane began, pointing to a genetic sequence highlighted in red. "What I didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that the 3rd generation incorporated something beyond selective breeding and cognitive enhancement." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "What do you mean?" Diane took a deep breath. "They introduced genetic modification, actual splicing of canine DNA with trace elements of other species." "What other species?" Elena asked, though something in her already sensed the answer. "Human DNA," Diane said quietly. "Specifically, neural development genes associated with language processing and abstract thinking." The silence that followed was profound. Max sat beside Elena, his intelligent eyes moving between the two women as if following their conversation. "That's not possible," Elena finally said. "It would be completely illegal. The ethical violations alone would explain the DoD classification and the extreme measures to recover him," Diane finished grimly. "Max isn't just an enhanced German Shepherd, Elena. He's something entirely new, a genuine cognitive hybrid. The first successful one, according to these records." Elena looked at Max, who returned her gaze with an awareness that now seemed even more profound. Had she always sensed this? Was this the inexplicable connection she'd felt from the beginning? "There's more," Diane continued, her voice dropping lower. "According to these records, Max's cognitive development is still ongoing. The neural pathways continue to form new connections. He's still evolving intellectually. What does that mean for him? Elena asked, protectively placing her hand on Max's head. I don't know, Diane admitted. The projections in these files suggest his comprehension could eventually approach that of a human child. But this is uncharted territory. Max whined softly, pressing closer to Elena's side. He understands what we're saying, doesn't he? Elena whispered. Not just commands or tone. He actually comprehends language. Diane nodded slowly. The tests I've been running support that theory. His language processing centers show activity patterns remarkably similar to human patterns. He may not be able to speak, but he understands, probably more than we've realized. The implications were staggering. No wonder Mercer had been so desperate to reclaim Max. No wonder the DoD had classified everything related to Project Guardian. The creation of a cognitive hybrid crossed ethical boundaries that most scientists wouldn't dare approach. What do we do with this information? Elena asked after a long silence. Before Diane could answer, Max suddenly stood alert, ears forward, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Seconds later, Elena heard vehicles approaching, multiple engines, moving fast. She rushed to the window. 3 black SUVs with government plates were speeding up her driveway, followed by a familiar Forest Service truck, Mercer's. They're here, she said, her heart racing. How did they? The hearing records were unsealed yesterday, Diane realized aloud. They must have learned I was accessing the classified files. They'll have traced my downloads. Elena moved with decisive speed, grabbing her emergency backpack from beside the door. We need to go? Now. Where? Diane asked, already gathering the scattered documents. There's an old fire lookout tower about 6 miles through the forest, Elena explained, pulling on her winter gear. My father used to take me there. It's not on current maps, decommissioned years ago. We can shelter there while we figure out our next move. As they prepared to flee, Max ran to Elena's bedroom and returned moments later with something in his mouth, the flash drive containing all of Project Guardian's files. He dropped it into her hand with deliberate purpose. Good boy, Elena whispered, tucking it securely into an inner pocket. The action confirmed what she now knew with certainty. Max understood exactly what was happening and what was at stake. They slipped out the back door as vehicles pulled up in front. Through the trees, Elena glimpsed armed men in tactical gear deploying around her cabin. This was no longer a legal dispute over custody. This was a Black Ops recovery of classified government property. The forest that had been Elena's lifelong home now became their sanctuary. She knew these woods intimately, every hidden trail, every natural shelter. Max moved silently beside her, occasionally pausing to listen before indicating the safest path forward with subtle gestures she had come to understand. As they made their way deeper into the snow-covered wilderness, the distant sound of pursuit faded behind them. Elena realized they had crossed a point of no return. By fleeing with Max and the classified files, she had chosen a path that could not be undone. What happens now? Diane asked as they paused in a sheltered ravine, their breath clouding in the frigid air. Elena looked at Max, who gazed back with those impossibly intelligent eyes that seemed to hold complete trust in her despite the uncertain future before them. Now we protect him, Elena said with quiet determination. And we make sure the world learns the truth about Project Guardian. Not just for Max, but for all the animals in the program. Max pressed against her leg, a gesture she had come to recognize as agreement. In that moment, something profound passed between them, an understanding that transcended the conventional boundaries between species. Whatever Max was, dog, experiment, evolutionary step forward, he was first and foremost a sentient being who deserved the right to his own existence. As twilight descended over the forest, they continued their journey through the deepening snow, 3 fugitives bound together by extraordinary circumstances and an unshakable bond. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and difficult choices. But of one thing, Elena was absolutely certain. The story of the ranger and her remarkable canine companion was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning. The snow continued to fall, erasing their tracks, as if nature itself was conspiring to protect them. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, a kindred spirit in the wild. Max lifted his head, listening, before turning his intelligent gaze back to Elena, a silent promise in his amber eyes. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and if you've watched all the way through, comment, "I watched all the way through," and share your thoughts about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears in the end screen. It's very exciting.